Hey, sorry for popping in on you before the video even gets started, but there's a bit of a disclaimer I have to give. The script writing process and even some of the production on this video started way back in October, and I'm talking like October 1st, which was before most of the trailers for Wilds dropped. This means that on top of, not considering the new monsters in the conversation, obviously, I also won't be able to talk about any of the new gizmos that monsters like Congalala, Yankudku, and Gypsaros bring to the table in the new generation. Not that it would probably really change them, then again, this video might age horrifically within a couple months, but I will not be discussing anything related to Wilds in this video, aside from my hopes and dreams. Also, I hope you like the new digs. I worked very hard on them. Anyways, I'll get out of your hair. Go, shoo, away with you. The Monster Hunter franchise. A series that spans over the last 20 years and has become a beloved icon of the gaming industry, covering topics like speculative biology, living off the land, ancient civilizations, caveman technology, and most importantly, monsters. Now, you might see the title of this video and wonder, hey, what the hell does this guy know about Monster Hunter? What gives him the qualification to talk about such a topic? And to that, I raise, since I was 8 years old, I've been playing these games for 13 years. I love this franchise almost more than any other. Ever since Monster Hunter Tri, I haven't missed a single release for a mainline game. And in that 13 years, I have spent God knows how many hours looking into, studying, picking apart each and every single monster in the series. How they eat, how they fight, how they kill, how they live, how they breathe. Everything about it is fascinating to me, and that's how you know I was a dinosaur kid. But frankly, in the community, there has been a lot of discourse in the past few years. And that discourse is over who exactly is the strongest monster in the franchise. I mean, it happens everywhere. Goku versus Superman, Batman versus Spider-Man, my dad beats your dad, the list goes on. And everybody in the community has given an opinion on it. Old-ass veterans like me, new hunters who just started with World or Rise, Pokemon fans who only played stories, you name it. But since this is a topic that I'm very interested in personally, and have given a lot of thought to since I was, 8, I just thought I'd throw my hat in the ring. But instead of just talking about who the strongest monster in the series is, I thought, why not go above and beyond to a completely pointless level of completion? Why not rank every single monster in the franchise? With an asterisk. But before we get cracking on those things, I'd think it's only reasonable I give out my criteria for these rankings, so I could pretend that I'm not just doing this arbitrarily. What exactly am I judging these monsters on? Well, first off, the same thing you judge any animal or any person on to gauge their strength. Physicality, build, might, athleticism. Insert synonym here. If a bear is going to fight a rooster, you would bet on the bear. It's bigger, faster, meaner, and a whole lot stronger. But that takes us to point 2. Element. Supernatural abilities, almost. In that same argument, if a bear fought a rooster, you would bet on the bear. But if the rooster starts hucking lightning bolts at the bear, the outcome probably starts getting a bit muddier, right? And that leads us into our final point. The third criteria I have. The most controversial criteria I have, which is presentation. Some monsters may be bigger, look stronger, look scarier, whatever. But sometimes the game just says, hey, this guy is just a stronger beastie. And I have to respect that. As much fun little ecology and speculative biology exists within the franchise, it is, when it comes down to it, still a fantasy series. One final note, I won't be including any monsters from spin-offs like Frontier, Stories Online, etc. Sorry to those Pokemon fans earlier. It's not that I dislike any of these games, far from it. It's just that some of them, especially Frontier, really can muddy the waters, and there's plenty of monsters to go over in the main series. But if you find yourself enjoying this video and want to see a sort of sequel covering those games, do me a favor and like this video and subscribe to the channel. It would mean the absolute most, and I could always very much use the support. I'm not ranking the Rise Apexes either. They're literally just bargain brand deviants. And I also won't be including any crossover or special event monsters because of dubious canonicity at best. This is about Monster Hunter, not Final Fantasy or Christmas. One last thing I'd like to add before we get started. If you happen to disagree with any of my takes here, and I am more than positive that you will, leave a comment, start a discussion. I'm more than happy to engage in a bit of friendly conversation. In fact, I encourage it. I think that's the most fun part about these discussions. So without any further ado, let's kick it off with our very first tier. Going into this, my main worry was what controversy I might stir up the closer and closer I got to the top of the list. However, as soon as I started, I was faced with a bit of a dilemma, one that was unexpectedly more difficult than picking the strongest. Out of all 228 large monsters to appear in the mainline series, I had to pick which one was the weakest. Now, I really had to take a second and think about this. I mean, there are only so many lower-tier monsters in the games. Most of them are drones or greats, but which of them could it be? A lot of them are fairly similar, so... Wait. Then it hit me. A monster that hasn't been seen in 16 years. The Vespoid Queen. That's right, folks, there is a Queen Vespoid, and the first and only game she's ever appeared in was Freedom Unite. Well, with that gigantic hurdle finally overcome, the second weakest shouldn't be controversial at all. It's Tsitsi Yaku.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Alright, I know, I hear you. How could he be weaker than the monsters right after him? Velocidrome, Gyadrome, and Great Jaggy. He's got a flash! And well, while a flash is nice and all, when I look at Tsitsi, I just can't help but find him a bit lacking in killing tools. His claws and teeth are just a bit smaller than his low-tier compatriots.
Ooh, that's kind of small.
And his lack of pack hunting ability really does a lot of damage to considering him above his fellow raptor kin. The two drones next to him have those massive claws that look like they could just about decapitate him, and Great Jaggy is just that bulk that poor Tsitsi just seems to lack. Not to mention that Gyadrome can in fact spit big snowballs at you, which, while it may not be enough to kill, would still probably suck to get hit by. But there's something all four of those bird wyverns lack that this next monster doesn't, which is flight. Coming up to round out our bottom five is the ever-fluttering, pain-in-the-ass-telos, Celtis. Celtis is a quick flyer with a bit of acid on its breath, but most importantly, it's basically one gigantic horn. No, not that kind of horn, which honestly gives it a fair shot at taking out any of these smaller monsters down here, as long as it gets the first shot. Flight is one of those very important abilities to have that will give certain monsters an edge throughout the entire list going forward. Now, going forward, we have another round of pack leaders. The Iadrome, Great Macau, Gendrome, Great Jagras, and Great Gyros. Iadrome's poison is most definitely an asset, but in two of these fellows' cases, being able to paralyze your enemy at the drop of a hat trumps the slow death of a poison, and would almost guarantee a kill in these lower ranks, and would overcome the Macau's incredible speed and agility, and Jagras' ability to really pack on the pounds. But I don't believe that they could overcome a certain silly fellow's combination of speed, size, and surprising intellect. Tool usage is a great sign for intelligence when on the evolutionary path, so good looks, Kulu. But even above him, we have the remaining greats, Roggy, Izuchi, and Baggy. Roggy's poison and improved bulk certainly makes it a greater threat than the Iadrome, while Izuchi's heavy weaponry in the form of a tail make it akin to a miniature version of a certain brute wyvern. But once again, showing itself to be above both weapons is something that can immediately immobilize any of its previous opponents, this time in the form of sleep. But you can't put something to sleep if it kills you first, which is why the quick charge of the Bulldrome, which would have no problem taking down any of its weaker competitors, places it higher on the list. And if you doubt that, well, just ask Robert Baratheon. But you know what else is quick and could gouge a hole in its opponents? Celtis, which is why his stronger cousin, the Desert Celtis, goes higher up on the list, because while its previous version could only go so far due to size, this one has a hidden trap card, Paralysis, at a range no less. Although I don't think that's quite enough to put it over quick thinking and, well, let's call it creativity, which is why Congalala and its hardly changed alternative Emerald Congalala come right in after to blow away the competition. And by blow, I mean fart, of course. The problem they run into is that, well, they're fairly resemblant of gorillas, and there's one animal I know that could beat a gorilla without question. A grizzly bear. And this grizzly bear's name is Arzuros. Everyone say, "Hi, Arzuros."
Hey!
But even everyone's favorite honey-suckling bear can't overcome a goofy turkey with Mario fireballs. Flight's a hell of a thing, which is why it's lucky for our next pick, because it can fly too, and its name is Kurapeko. Both Kurapekos, actually. Now, of course, Kurapeko comes with a giant asterisk next to its name, because if he so chooses, he could just summon a Rathian, or worse yet, a Devil Joe to come clean your ass up for him. But if we're looking at the monster on its own, both versions have a solid toolkit filled with loud noise and explosive cleavage. It also has the unique ability to buff itself through song, just like our beloved community hunting horn mains. Coming up next might even be able to do the same thing if you gave it a hunting horn, because both Blangonga and Copper Blangonga seem to be strolling down the evolutionary pathway on the same course as us humans. And they're beginning to show skilled tool usage, and are possibly even capable of learning from hunters. But the only thing holding this sharp simian from the top of the list is size, which for some ungodly reason the Cephadrome seems to have in spades. Why in God's name is this thing so big? You fight it so early and it can swim in the sand, and it has paralysis, and it has Plesio's ridiculous f***ing hitbox. Man, that first tier went by pretty quick. If I'm able to keep this pace, this will be easier than I... Oh, man. The unfortunate part for me is that the further along we go, the more explaining I'll have to do to justify my choices. Which means that along with more monsters in just about every tier going forward, I'll spend more and more time talking about each of them. Bless my typing fingers, everyone. This script is going to be a long one. Well, to kick off our Funky Fellas tier, we're going to have to start with just that, a Funky Fella. Two Funky Fellas even, in both varieties of Palumu. Both have flight, which is a point in their favor compared to most of the tier just below them, but they're also significantly larger than either Celtis or Kut-Ku. They also have much tighter aerial control than most of their prior competitors, which gives them plenty of pokeability from their clubby tail. Of course, Nightshade benefits from copious amounts of sleep gas, which gives him a nod over his basic counterpart. But frankly, I don't think Palumu's physical traits take as much advantage of sleep as some of our pointier competitors. Our next goofy goobers, however, do have a deadlier combo of statuses, all stuffed inside a rubber chicken who wants nothing more than to be as big a pain in the ass as possible. Gypsyros and Purple Gypsyros are, once again, not the most physically imposing wyverns, but their combination of statuses I find significantly more deadly than the poofy-necked bats. Poison is very strong in the right hands, and noxious poison more so, and combined with their famed flashbang and faux death trickery, it makes for a monster that really stalls and waits out their opponent's death, while incapacitating potential prey. But once again, other than a tough beak and a little whippy tail, nothing about either monster's physicality makes it significantly more difficult to put down than the other. And I think this is similarly true of Puke, but the difference between these two poison wyverns is that Puke's biology is just uniquely built to slather anything in as much poison as possible. I don't think I've ever seen one monster with so many ways to deliver the exact same status effect, outside of Elder Dragons. With Gypsyros, he's gonna have to work to hit something with that poison. With Puke, it's pretty much just a matter of time. And poison is a real nuisance, but is it going to kill you immediately? Unlikely. What is more likely to kill you is just being lit on fire. That's generally not fun, which is something Aknasam is very capable of. In fact, it may be the most physically impressive lower tier bird wyvern on top of that. With a tough hide that makes up its crest that can block its sensitive neck from attacks, strong wing bones that can be used as sharp weapons, and a long piercing beak, going mano a mano with an Aknasam as a smaller monster isn't a position I'd ever want to be in. All this combined with its tricky bouncing fireballs makes it potentially the best jack of all trades in this tier, and gives it a fair shot even against monsters above it. But quick question for you all. Have you ever been hit by a car? Well, here's Lagambi, the car. Except mammals are a lot denser than cars. This is a white rhino, which weighs up to 5,000 pounds. That's a bit over 2,200 kilograms for the rest of you guys, which is about the upper end weight for a minivan. This is Lagambi. A lot bigger than a rhino. Probably weighs on the lower end of my estimations at least 2.5 times more. So imagine getting hit by a 6-ton vehicle with claws and a big fat belly. I don't really think that needs any more explanation. If you get hit by something that big, moving that fast, your bones go bye-bye. Now we move from a hard hitter to someone who's hard to hit. Tobi-Kadachi takes the moveset of a mini Nargacuga and turns the agility up to 11. It's smaller, but not too small. Fast, agile, and it's got a hell of a knockout punch with that tail slam. I imagine it's one of the most difficult monsters to take out in its preferred habitats, which is the exact same reason I have Kechawacha as his running mate here. With a similar membrane between its arms, just like his squirrely electric friend, and long arms, it hops through the trees with a similar grace about it. But those long, dexterous arms and ranged mucus projectiles just barely tip the scales in its favor for me. Now let's call back to earlier. Remember how I said Nightshade Palumu would really benefit from some pointy bits to really capitalize on that sleep gas? Well, fear not, because Hypnocatrice makes good on that promise. Not necessarily as physically capable as Aknasam, but capable enough to where once it puts you to sleep, you're likely not going to wake up. Strong legs with sharp claws and a hooked beak are all you really need when you can KO something else at will. Naturally, the best way to defend against such an offense would be a solid deep fish. Fish. Mudfish. He's big. He's got mud. Mud the bird. Mud the monkey. Mud the squirrel.
Deploying flashbang.
Well, the trickiest Sibian yet has a literal tool pouch of options to choose from, making him just about the deadliest yet. Poison? Yup. Flashbang? You betcha. Paralysis? That too. Just as agile as the rest of the monsters his size with 10 times more of the options. It's hard to top that. Trying to fight a Bishaten as another monster must be like... Thankfully, Giratodus' other aquatic friend, Royal Ludroth, comes up right after to get revenge. I don't like how I delivered that. But thankfully, Giratodus' other aquatic friend... What the fuck am I doing? But thankfully, Giratodus' other aquatic friend, Royal Ludroth, comes up right after to get revenge. He's just about as big as Giratodus is, and has the added advantage of proper, spammable ranged projectiles to counter something like Bishaten's fruit throwing. Plus, that big sponge around his neck serves as incredible protection for vital areas like his neck and head, making him a surprisingly tanky son of a gun. That, with the added claws and a whipping tail, makes him a decently tough competitor. Both Somnicanths have tools that put it over its fellow Leviathan, though, in my opinion, but only barely. Aside from relatively large claws, the normal variety of Somnicanth lives up to its Latin root with a heavy variety of sleep-inducing effects that, when combined with said claws and occasional explosions, make it a slippery serpent to outmaneuver. But ditching the sleep for raw elemental power is the Aurora Somnicanth, who dishes out icy bursts with almost every single attack. A great way to slow opponents down and break past defenses. But if we're talking element, perhaps nothing below the apex tier possesses greater thunder acuity than Kezu. Kezu and Red Kezu are effectively the exact same monster, much like many old generation subspecies. But they both boast incredible thunder abilities, and they have to, because physically they are some of the most unimpressive wyverns in the series. They are capable of shooting projectiles of thunder far from their body, containing it in a field around their bodies for defense, and better yet, each of these thunder attacks carries the potential to paralyze, which would open any opponent up to being hit by another salvo of electrical blight. An extending neck is nice, but only serves against smaller monsters, as its tiny head would have trouble finding any purchase or tearing a chunk out of anything with decent bulk or hard armor. And at the end of the day, it's still just a big old squishy ball. Something with significant bulk or sharp weapons would easily be able to take down a Kezu. Something like Gobul, who, while its Gypsaros-esque flash wouldn't work on the blind Kezu, which is a point in his favor, but it would work on just about anything else. And when it gets mad and puffs up, dozens of spines filled with paralysis-inducing toxin jut out from its back, turning it into one giant status-inducing mace of a fishy fella. Then again, there's always a chance Gobul belongs much higher on this list, as there are rumors that the ones we fight are all juvenile and the true adults are much larger. Or that's just a commonplace misconception caused by a translation error. But hey, with how receptive Capcom's been to the community over the last few years, you never know. Hey, how'd that get you? Well, if Bishaten was a problem already, what would happen if you filled his pouch with hand grenades? That's what Blood Orange Bishaten aims to answer. Old Bob here has a tendency to throw highly explosive pine cones, which he uses to devastating effect. throwing them in confusing and wild patterns, causing gigantic direct explosions, or laying them around to create a minefield for any unsuspecting monster to end up lying upon. Add the gigantic cone of fire it now spits, and voila! You have a walking affront to the Geneva Convention to confront at your displeasure. The only way to combat something like that, other than direct and overwhelming force, is to get it to harm itself, something that perhaps only this monster and its variant are capable of. Malfestio gets away with punching far above its weight class by expertly using a combination of sleep and a wholly unique status in confusion, causing any opponent afflicted to trip over themselves as if their world had been reversed entirely. Combine that with a significant weapon in its wings that are lined in what are, in effect, gigantic curved swords, and you come out with what could be described as the greatest trickster the Monster Hunter series has to offer. Once again, you need a solid defense, something like, let's say, a hard shell to really protect yourself from something like that. Which is why our most dedicated lance main, Daimyo Hermitar, takes precedent. And Plum 2, because he's literally the same, just got a different shelmet. The combination of tough shell, tougher skull, and two fantastic offensive options make Daimyos very tough customers for just about any living thing to face head on. With a gigantic horn he can easily use to puncture most fleshy hide from beneath, which is where it's usually the weakest, and two gigantic claws which, well, if a regular tiny crab is this strong...
Wow, that's pretty bad!
Then you can imagine how strong one that's bigger than a human being is. A tough shell and a winning smile can only do so much, though, and while Baroth has an exploitable underbelly for Daimyo to stab, he's got a few tools up his sleeves to keep him a little higher on the list. That hard head makes it a perfect ram, and Baroth uses it to great effect when paired with its surprisingly explosive speed. Take the Lagambi car analogy from earlier, but multiplies the size by another 2. Not to mention, the mud coating he sports gives him a slippery edge when paired against a lot of monsters, making him difficult to bite or grab. And you could use it to obfuscate their vision if he lands a lucky shot with it. Not to mention, he's got a face anybody could love. I mean, come on, look at him. The best. He also comes paired with Jade Baroth, because that species is the same thing, but with snow. Thankfully, there are plenty of great snow-themed monsters, like Beatotus over here, who's also shockingly gigantic. I mean, what's with Piscine wyverns and being just fucking enormous for some reason? Combined with a crushing constrictor-like grip and giant crushing teeth, it makes for one tough, fishy fish. But next up, a subspecies that actually has differences from its common variety and makes it a shockingly effective monster when it comes to waiting its opponents out. The purple Ludroth is absolutely slathered in poison. Literally. That great spongy mane I talked about earlier, well, instead of being soaked with water, it's soaked with noxious poison, which means that anytime anything tries to bite at a potentially fatal area, instead of grabbing onto anything important, it instead would get a mouthful of poison. It makes him something of a giant poison dispenser, all but guaranteeing any enemy would become inflicted. This, combined with Ludroth's already impressive physicality, as discussed earlier, knocks him a couple pegs above his well-hydrated counterpart. Ludroth has a weakness when it comes to his agility, though, which many of our friends in the Fang Beasts do not. Perhaps the most acrobatic of which we mentioned earlier. Quechahuacha has a subspecies, Ash Quechahuacha, all the upsides of his earlier main species, with the added benefit of firing flaming mucus out much like a mortar with enough force to even launch himself backwards. And at the end of the day, napalm mucus trumps water balloons. But to flip-flop things around, like how Quecha trumped... Man, I really gotta stop saying that word. But to flip-flop things around, like how Quecha trumped Tobi-Kadachi last time, I have Viper Tobi-Kadachi above Ash Quecha. While Ash certainly could cause more upfront damage than Viper could, Viper has the luxury of paralyzing you, stunning you, and watching you die a slow death. Physicality, though, said that a lot today. And what is more physical than big meaty men slapping meat? The biggest and meatiest of men, Sumo. Our resident Sumo Kappa Platypus turtle, Tetranodon, is the most physically gifted member of this tier, with two massive forelimbs that could wrestle other monsters to the ground, and the ability to balloon itself up with water to increase its mass. Not many monsters in the series could boast similar strengths to Tetranodon. This isn't to say it can't be deadly from a range, as not only does it swallow water to increase its size, but rocks as well, which makes its projectiles even more deadly than the variety used by your average water monster. There are, of course, other ways to make water deadly, the most applicable of which is pressurizing it. And perhaps no other monster is more adept at utilizing pressurized water than Coral Puke Puke. Having the ability to shoot jets of water from its tail and face, he even purposefully is able to manipulate how focused the beam is. And given how dangerous pressurized water can be to flesh, and even stone, there's not many defenses that are going to effectively stop Coral over here. So a shocking combination of speed and defenses are likely necessary to surpass this overwhelming force. And when a bowling ball the size of a truck comes careening down a mountainside at full speed, poor Puke won't have the time or firepower to stop that in its tracks, which is why Volvidon ranks closer to the top of this list. Now, I know that Tetranodon wins his turf war against Volvi, but frankly, does it seem to you like Volvidon is really trying its hardest here? When rolling at top speed, there's not much in Monster Hunter that's faster on the ground than a Volvidon, and guesstimating its weight to be at least similar to Legambi's, with it moving much faster and having all that force concentrated much better, well, it's basically a living cannonball. Aiding its ability to roll up and smash bones apart like a battering ram are its statuses, Paralysis and Soiled. Now, making a monster smell bad probably won't do much other than making it back off, but Paralysis gives Volvidon a free shot at hitting something as hard as it can. And as mentioned, that is very, very hard. To beat such a foe, an opponent would likely need a reliable way to simply avoid getting hit, not just by its rolling, but by its paralyzing spit as well, which is why our first Temnoceran friend on the list is Nursilla, whose adept web-slinging affords it excellent repositioning skills on the ground and in the air. Not to mention how many large monsters she could potentially catch in the same web of hers. It's strong enough to hold her own weight easily, and even the weight of monsters even larger than her. You literally use it as one of the zones in Monster Hunter 4. She also possesses one of the holy grail immobilizing statuses with her stinger that can inflict sleep. And her massive jaws that jut out of her mouth are capable of inflicting poison, and even deadly poison in some instances. The bugs have a tendency to really be able to punch above their weight class, which will become extraordinarily important going further up on this list. But some things are just too strong. And being a massive, explosively athletic, burrowing, rock-crushing amphibian is just too strong. Starting our tier's top 5 is Tetsu Cabra, a monster that frankly has no business being as tough as it is. There's a voice in my head that almost wants me to put it even higher, but I think that having it where it is now is fine. We have two major problem areas for other monsters. One, it is just huge. It isn't the longest monster by any metric, but it's bulky, massive, very weighty, and has a low center of gravity. It's like if a toad and a pug had a child and then slammed Tren for 30 years. Problem area 2 is its head. This Goliath thick skull which can slam through rock without much trouble, topped off with the most monstrous set of jaws. Pound for pound, it's just got to have the strongest bite force in the series. The rocks it shovels out of the ground are deceptively large, of a similar volume to the monster itself, and it's able to crush them really without much difficulty at all. For some reference, limestone on average is over double the density of muscle, which means Tetsu Cabra should have next to no issue lifting, crushing, or otherwise maiming any monster in this tier, and perhaps even above it. It's going to be difficult to use tricks on something like this. The rocks are like shields. He could burrow and evade, he's stronger, he's faster. It would take something like pure, unadulterated violence. It would take Deviants. The Deviants, a rowdy group of extreme monsters shaped by almost statistically impossible extenuating circumstances. Each and every one of them is its species at its absolute pinnacle. These monsters will be making their appearance throughout the entire list as it continues, but one has to come first, and that first one is Red Helm Arzuros. It's bigger, faster, stronger, and meaner in every way. Now, just being a better Arzuros is one thing, but it's the degree of improvement that's the important part. It can toss its large body through the air without problem, dash forward at shocking speeds, and its paw swipes tear through the ground as if it were paper mache. It's one thing to have a tool on your body specifically made to shovel and move earth. It's a completely other to idly slap the ground and have it basically explode. There's a lot of silly equations and people much more qualified than I am to talk about physics and the like, but I can say for nearly 100% certainty that slapping things doesn't transfer energy very well. So if the ground reacts that violently to a hand wave, one could only imagine the ridiculous punching power that this brutish bear packs. It's no exaggeration to say that this bear's level of strength is disproportionately absurd, to an almost similar degree as something like Well, he'll show up later, but you get the point. To take out this monster, it took the already ridiculous Tetsukabra, except now instead of just rocks that he munches on, it's giant bombs. Otherwise, Berserk Tetsukabra is basically the exact same, other than the fact that he's a bit more grumpy. So, Snowball. That's right, our second Deviant comes in at number 2 in this tier in the shape of Snow Baron Lagambi, and he holds the record for largest snowball at the 2016 Winterfest. Good job, buddy. Having similar physical strength to Red Helm with the added benefits of projectiles, and sometimes said projectiles are the size of a house, it's also worth mentioning that it is one thing to pick something up, and another thing to be able to throw it. That takes a lot more effort, which makes our Lagomorph friend here that much more impressive. And God forbid a monster gets hit by that. Half the ones in this tier below might just die. It's bigger and heavier than, like, Kutku, poor guy. There's only one hero that could save us from these early onset deviants, these monstrous frogs, these pinball wizards. The monster with the smallest brain, with the biggest heart, the one who eats the best rocks, the one with the biggest charm, the people's champ, Dodogama! Now, there are two types of people who've just begun typing. Those who are saying, Crow, you moron, Dodogama is clearly the strongest in the series. Are you insane? And those saying, Crow, you moron, Dodogama is the lowest tier monster in the Elder's Recess. Why the hell is it this high? I'm aiming for as much objectivity as possible with this list, and hell, in certain points, I'm probably wrong. I'm definitely wrong. It's hard to consider so many factors when determining the strongest overall. Like, seriously, I'm currently 8 pages into a script, and not even close to halfway through the entire tier list.
The script ended up being 103 pages.
I never even wrote this much in high school, even if they asked me to. I just wouldn't. So I'm being as serious as I possibly can be when I say nobody punches above their weight class like Dodo does. I mean, have you seen what he does to Uragan when he comes rolling in? I've legitimately watched Dodogama artillery-fired Uragan into a wall. For reference, Uragan is used to very extreme temperatures and uses explosives all of the time. And he's huge! One of the biggest brute wyverns in the series. The list of beasties he tussles with goes on. Names like Azur Rathalos, Basilgeese, even Devil Joe. For the most part, Dodogama is consistently able to repel these significantly larger wyverns and go about its life with relative peace. If that doesn't speak to some unreal power in these explosive blasts, then I don't know what does. He's effectively a living mortar who waddles around and eats rock. Snow Baron Snowball, blow it up. Tetsukabra Rock, blow it up. Chargy Volvodon, blow it up. There's just not much that could trump a good old-fashioned explosion, and it's for that very good reason why Dodogama ranks at number 1 on our second tier for funky fellas. Enjoy your crown, little buddy. The competition from here is going to get a lot fiercer and a lot more contentious, because next up is our Apex tier, and it is the largest by far, with the least amount of gaps in power between each monster. But that next tier will have to be saved for part 2, because I realized that we're only 8 pages through a 100-page script, and if I were to do this all in one go, it would take forever. So I've resigned to the fact that I'll be releasing this in parts. This will be the only video that has 2 tiers in one, I think, and I will periodically be releasing each tier as its own video. But in other big news for the future of the channel, I just recently found myself employed. What does this mean? Okay, 2 big things, right? First thing, I probably won't be putting out videos super regularly, at least for now, which is, I know, ironic because I don't exactly put videos out very regularly anyways, which I stumble over my fucking words there, but you know what I mean. B, though, and more importantly, I'll probably be able to get myself a half-decent computer soon, and this is really where I'll be able to get things rolling in terms of the channel. I plan to make better, higher quality videos now that I have, or now that I will have a better machine to run them, because God knows this thing can't run anything that was made past 2019. And I also plan to eventually start streaming. So look forward to those things in the future, because I know I'm very excited to be able to not only play the games that I want to play because I'll have something that can actually run them, but I'll be excited to push this channel further in terms of the level of content I'm able to make and the amount of content I'll be able to make. So expect good things, big and good things. This video, I kind of consider the start of a new sort of process and style of video that I'll be trying to make for the channel. This, not necessarily pure video essays, more of a one-time thing for this, but I really do want to start combining video essays and gameplay into kind of a one sort of thing with commentary, and I don't know, it's a production. Big things ahead. I'm very happy to finally have cash flow. Until I can make a career out of this, having an actual income will be very nice in terms of putting things into the channel and hopefully getting some things out of it. But I won't keep you here any longer if you stuck around this long to listen to me yet. Look forward to part 2. Hopefully it'll come out soon. I can't give you an estimate on that one, but maybe I'll be able to pump this out faster. This video surprisingly wasn't that difficult to make, other than the obvious script writing, which took me months. But the actual editing portion of this was not very difficult. It took a couple of days, honestly. So hopefully now that the script is done, all I have to do is record the script and each part will come out fairly regularly, maybe once a month. We'll see, but I'll stop yapping and rambling. See you next time.